Hey, welcome back, everybody. I just wanted to go over the final 1.1 skill thing that we're going to cover, which is the planning phase. So, planning phase is absolutely imperative if you ever want to do anything that is a little bit outside of your normal range, or something that you haven't done before that's complicated, or if you have a lot of moving parts in terms of you have a lot of people, you have a strict deadline, you have to get good at good planning, high quality planning. And all I'm going to do is give you some tools to do it, and I'm going to give you some practice to do it. So, without getting too much into it, what I will say is that without good, solid planning, you're really not going to be able to accomplish much. And you're definitely not going to be able to accomplish anything with somebody else. So, I'm going to squeeze myself down in the corner here. We'll pull up the rubric that we have, which is that plan, action, result. So, what we're looking at here is the plan, action, result portion of the rubric that you will be graded on all year. I really don't change these very much, I just get higher expectations. All I'm covering is this expectations, my proficient. So this is meeting your expectations. You want to go above and beyond? That's awesome. Go above and beyond, communicate back to me how you went above and beyond, why that was adding value to your process. But right now, I'm just telling you what the process is and what the expectations are. You've got to develop a complete list of tasks in order to actually complete the project. This takes your imagination, this takes your forethought, this takes your insight. You got to think through the process from the beginning to the end and actually come up with a list of all the things that you could possibly need to actually make this project happen. Then you actually have to come up with a robust written plan that's reflective of both the timeline and the tasks. So by robust, I don't necessarily mean all the things written out in specific detail. Bullet points are fine, but everything needs to be accounted for in the written plan. Also, the plan has to be well organized. Things have to go in an order in which they make some sense, it has to be flexible, and you have to allow for some finishing up time. Because if you plan on just coming across that finish line right on time, you know it's not going to happen, and so do I. So, leave yourself a little bit of wiggle room. Try to plan on getting done with your projects in the first 90% of your timeline every time. That leaves you a solid 10% of your time to actually tie up any loose ends and make it look better, if nothing else. Alright, you have to show some evidence of being regularly revisited. It's not good enough just to make a plan. You actually have to make the plan, and you have to look back at the plan to make sure you're on track with the plan and make adjustments in the plan. You have to revise the plan to reflect the reality of what's going on. If I come to you or your teammates come to you and they want to see, hey, how are we doing with this? If you don't have yet annotated on your plan and your plan updated to reflect the reality, then you might as well just pitch the plan at that point. And finally, most importantly for this piece, is your project is completed at a given deadline. I really don't give a lot of leeway for going above that deadline. The way I see it is those deadlines are hard and fast. We got to move on with the class. We got a lot to cover, and do what you can in the time that you're given. Finally, you need to identify successes and failures of the project and the process, not just the content of it. So that opposed to content is very important. You're looking at the project and the process yourself. All right, so you're looking at this rubric, I'm looking at this rubric, and you're wondering, where did I get this thing? It's pretty straightforward. A couple places we're going to look at this. Go back into our very first project. We're at 1.1. We're at the history of the trebuchet. We're looking at this unanswerable question: what does the existence of the trebuchet suggest about the world it existed in? And in order to actually start the project, you have to utilize the self-directed learning process to complete a task. Now, that is the rubric I just covered. I'm going to show you a tool that I built to help you get there. So if you click on this, it's going to bring up your course in Schoology. It's going to bring you down to the From Trebuchets to Broadsides, Module 1, Skill, Self-Directed Learning, 120-minute plan. Now I pulled it up over in another window, but you just click on this, and yours might come up with an edit or something where you have to actually edit the document. And then down here at the very bottom, you're going to see the plan, the action, the task list, and the mission. First things first, we're going to focus in on the mission. We got to know what we need to do, how we need to do it. Remember, this is not your project. This is you proving to me that you can use this tool. You have 5,000 personnel in the developing groups, right? You got a whole army of 5,000. You got people who are planners. You have money lenders. You have siege engineers. You've got soldiers. You got support personnel. You've got siege engine operators. And you've got a couple spies as well. And you want to travel to a kingdom that is vulnerable. And it possesses some riches and some land that you want to take over. This is a class about siege warfare at the very beginning. We get into the other stuff later, but come on. It's trebuchets to broadsides. Your job is to plan the whole operation based on the link in cell B1. The steps to the process are as follows. All right, before I get too far into this, these are called columns. I'll just scroll out so you can see a little bit better. These vertical things are called columns. Think about them like Roman columns. In terms of they support weight. You could put something right there on top of them. You could just take my head and just move it, and I could sit right here and get balanced on this. The other pieces are called rows. These are called rows. Okay, I don't have a good explanation for that one. I don't have anything funny to say about rows. But just know that columns are typically A, B, C. Rows are typically 1, 2, 3. And when I say B1, I'm making reference to this. It's actually okay. If you've ever played like, Battleship, you get it. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and click on this. Open that new tab anyway. So we'll open that hyperlink. We'll just see what it has to say. Okay, medieval warfare, how to capture a castle with siegecraft. And so this is going to give you a sense of what you have to do in order to make this. So as you're making the plans, this is a good article to reference back. But we're not here to talk about the article. We're here to talk about how to use the tool. And I feel like I'm taking too much time. So I gave you the steps. I gave you the phases, right? Step 1 is going to be to make a complete and robust task list that will need to take place successfully to lay siege to the castle. Step 2, you're going to have to divide the list of tasks between your group with minutes substituted for days. So what this means is that when you have the first 5 minutes, I'm really talking about the first 5 days there. Now, hinty, copy and paste is your friend here. Alright, to make at least 2 changes to your plan for each phase in the action phases. So these phases are happening down here. You've got your task list, your plan, your action 1, action 2, action 3. And finally, reflect on the presumed success of your siege in the result tab by calling out what went well and what could have gone better. Alright. So this is your mission. You can refer back to this, and now you're going to come down here into the next tab over, and you're going to click on the task list. Now, I've already put some things in here that I think would be helpful. The task number is just the task ID. Don't worry about that. It's not the order. It's nothing like that. All you have to do is think about all the potential things you would have to do in order to lay siege in the 12th century. So, I'm saying assembling an army. Sure, that makes sense. You don't get a group and army together, you're probably not going to lay siege to anybody anywhere. You have to get some funds for that army. I mean, people have to get paid somehow. I mean, even if you are looking at the feudal system, you do have to fund this venture somehow. You've got to gather supplies for the army, you've got to get siege supplies, and then the movement of the supplies is huge. I mean, how are you going to get things from one place to the other? And are you going to carry everything heavy there? I don't know. It's up to you. Finally, you have to choose a target, get the decision approved. You're just making the plan here. Rarely are the kings and queens actually hammering out the plans. So you have to get that plan approved at some point. All right. So the task order slash phase. I want you to think about these as big phases. In fact, if you have 120 days to do this, which is what I gave you, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, we call it action because it rides into the rubric well. But if you think about it through phases, you can do it pretty easily. So you could say task order and phase, and you could just pick a number from the drop down. So task order and phase is just what needs to come first. What has to be done before other things can be done? Can you raise an army before you raise the funds? Can you, get a plan approved before you pick a target? These types of things. If they're in a phase, they're in an order, then they have to be making sense in terms of where you put them. And then task priority. It's kind of a difficult one, and I'm leaving it up to you to decide. You have the same type of task priority numbers. You've got 1 through 10. You've got a blank and a non-applicable. So, is this a number one priority? Is this something that absolutely has to get done? Or is this something that you might be able to skip? Is this something that you might be able to not put so much effort into? And that's going to be important a little bit later. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and crank out some of these task priorities, task orders, and I'm just going to put them in here kind of randomly because truthfully, I don't want to give away too many answers. I just want to see how you're doing things. Well, that's kind of an NA here. So, all right. So once we get these things, if I hit delete there, it'll be you have to hover over it, click it, and hit the delete button, and it'll take away a mistake. Then you go through task priority. Well, I'd say task priority assembling the army. Yeah, I'm gonna say 2 there. Funds, definitely need funds. Supplies, I might go ahead and got supplies. Siege, we're laying siege. Movement of supplies, might be able to think about that. Choosing a target, we'll go 2 there. And finally get approval. Whatever, even if they say no, I'm still doing it. All right. So now we have our task descriptions. We have the priority at which they are. We have the task order and the phase. And what we could do is actually sort things by these different parts. So the way we sort things is we can just select what we want to sort, like this, come up to data, custom sort, or we could just sort these, top to bottom. Phase. It's going to ask us if we want to expand a selection. Now, what that means is if we want to take the data from this column and leave it alone, and the data from these 2 columns and leave them alone, then we would just sort this column. But we don't want to do that. We want to expand the whole thing and sort. So now we have things that are in phase 1, we have things that are in phase 2, and we have things that are in phase 3. It's going to make things a little bit easier for us. So, moving on, getting on to the plan phase of this. This all of a sudden looks different. You're going to notice that some things make a little less sense here. You have group members. You have minutes. The reason I left that alone is because your group members are going to be the different people in your group. The minutes in this situation are going to be days. And you see you have all the way down to 120. So, going back up to figure out who we had that we could use. So group members, this is an individual group, right? Or in your cases, will be an individual later on. But who do we have in terms of groups in this project? Well, we have a couple people. Oh, got it. We have planners. We have money lenders. We have siege engineers. We have soldiers. We have support personnel. So, if we want to, we can just take this little guy here And we can come up here and we can say, okay, we have planners, copy, bring it over to the plan, paste. We have money lenders, copy, plan, paste. We have siege engineers. Now you notice I'm coming up to the top row up here because it's easier to copy and paste out of this row than it is from the actual like A1 cell. Plan, paste. We have spies. I'm just gonna write it. Just whatever, just copy it. All right, so what you're gonna notice is that every time we make a change to the plan over here, it actually makes changes to all the other phases. Now the way that works, and it's important to understand the way it works and why it works, is because if you look in this block, up here it says action 3 in kind of the single quotes with an exclamation mark, B3. So that means that whatever is in action 3, B3, goes in this cell. And that's nice because it keeps our plan the same for each phase unless we change the plan. So let's go back to the plan. This is our initial intention, spies, and it doesn't have anything up here, so we're going to go look for it. We're going to say go look for a castle with treasure and a shrubbery. Alright, so we're going to spend 5 days doing that, right? And then we're going to say gather intel on said castle. So we can see that we start having spies go out and look around. Siege engineers, right? Start designing. Trebuchet. Alright, so they got 5 days to start designing the trebuchet while the spies are going out to look for the shrubbery and treasure. And you're going to notice, as we come over here, the siege engineers are doing this. They're designing the trebuchet, and then they're still doing this. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that our plan from the very beginning, and quick trick here, you don't like the way this looks, which is kind of what I'm doing, you select it all like this, and you're in the home tab. You can go in this wrap text thing, and that usually helps kind of bring things back to a way that is a little easier to read. So we got this, we got the money lenders, we got the planners, and everybody has these plans, everybody has these things they're going to do. And you can just put them in their spots. And if you want to, what you can do is for, you know, your money lenders here, you can say gather funds, and maybe we want them to do that for the first 30 days. I can just come down here in the very corner, and it has to be this, you get a lot of symbols you'll see when they hover over the corners, but I'm looking for this black plus sign, like that. It's all black. If I hold that, click it, drag it down for the first 30 days, what that's going to do is it's going to autofill that whole piece. Now, once it's autofilled, you can guess that over in Action 1, that's what they'll be doing. Now, let's say the funds are gathered here, and we're going to start getting into the second phase here, but let's say this is just what we have so far, and we get the whole thing filled out, and then we're going to start making changes. So we have our plan completely filled out with what everybody is going to do the entire time to actually make this siege happen, all the way out to day 120. That's going to populate into the action 1, action 2, action 3, action 4. And when I say we actually need to go back and adjust and make some changes, let's say that you make the assumption that your people, your moneylenders, on the second action phase actually gathered all their money. You know, they don't really need to be doing this anymore. In fact, they stopped gathering money after the first 15 days, and they started distributing and dispersing the funds. So we could say disperse funds to barons. Now, that's where I'm going to say we're making some changes. We're going from the point where we were gathering funds the whole time in action 1 to action 2, which is starting to actually disperse the funds. This is a way that when we go through projects, you start with a plan that encompasses the whole thing. And then the next time you work on the project, we're going to call that your action 1 day. And if this would be a 4-day project, I'd want you to revisit your plan and update your plan on a regular basis. You never have to look back at what happened until the very end. So let's get into that section at the very end, and we can close this video out. So, action 4, you see everything's populated over. It'll tell a story, and now we're going to go to result. All right. You notice what I'm doing by making this bigger and smaller? A lot of times what I'll do is I'll hold the control button on the bottom of my keyboard, and I'll just roll my mouse up or down. And that kind of makes things go big or small. The other thing you can do if you're sitting on top of it is come down to the corner and actually hit the plus or minus button to make it bigger or smaller. Kind of depends on what you like. There's 2 ways of doing it. Alright, so for this section, and I'm just going to get myself into this. Yeah, that feels comfortable. Yeah, way down here? Yeah, sure. Alright, for this section, what we're going to do is after action review. So you already laid siege to this castle. We're going to presume you were successful. Here, you're going to write your description. So you click on here and start writing your description of what was successful. Now, it doesn't have to be completely encompassing, but basically what I want here is a good summary of what happened. You don't have to get into all the details. The details should be sussed out in the plan, but things that aren't sussed out in the plan, just a summary of your project, should be here. Kind of the big picture, big sweep. Now, next piece are going to be some successes. What worked? What worked well? You know, what worked well for 1, 2, and 3, and then what failed? Give us some, failures. What didn't work so hot on 1, 2, and 3? Things that you could improve on next time. And then finally, the completion of the higher level thinking process reflection actually just goes back to the rubric. So if you're wondering at all what that looks like, go back to the rubric. Go back to the self-directed learning rubric. You're looking at here. You're thinking, identify the successes and failures of the process. We did that. Reflects on the final product. And defensively completed the higher level thinking rubric. So, back to the higher level thinking rubric, which is this piece, did we actually complete the rubric? Now for this task in particular, we don't really have a specific project, so don't worry about this too much. But this is a reference to the fact that most of your projects have 3 major rubric components. You have the higher level thinking, you have the self-directed learning, and you have the historical thinking skills, which is also higher level thinking. All right, so good luck. I hope that makes some sense. I hope it works for you, and feel free to experiment. Save a new copy, go ahead, try to break it, see if that works. If you do break it, just download a new copy. That's how you learn these types of things. And you will be working with other people. Feel free to ask other people. I mean, honestly, reaching out to the other students in this class is a sense of community that we need. At the end of the day, I address the most common questions, but a lot of the little nuanced things will come up, and that's part of growing and developing, is learning how to solve through some of these issues. So I'm here for you. You've got like 64 other kids that are here for you, and we want to get you through this process. So good luck, and make sure to leave your comments down below.